Okay, so I'm gonna record some video to try to help people in the front end nano degree course to kind of understand how all of this portfolio project comes together. Uh, the course is good. It teaches you the basic fundamentals of responsive design and building web pages. But I think what it's missing is how all those fundamentals come together into an actual web page. So that's what I'm going to try to attempt to do. I don't have any script or anything. I'm just kind of winging this as I go. So, background on me, I'm a senior front-end developer for a small marketing firm in a small town in Virginia. I've been building websites since 1999. I'm self-taught, and I've been to college for web development, web design, but never actually finished the courses because they are so far behind in the technology, it's ridiculous. The thing about this field is that, yes, you can teach yourself as long as you put forth the effort and the time to understand the concepts. You can learn it all on your own. And I know that because I've done that. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. That's the bottom line. So here's how this works. This is the mockup that you see in front of you. I've opened it in. I've taken the PSD the PDF file that they've given us, and just opened it in Photoshop, and got rid of the colored boxes they had on the side. They gave you those colored boxes to use as kind of a basis for colors, for the color scheme for this quote-unquote website mockup. So what happens is whenever you get a mock-up, like in the real world, what you're going to do is you're going to work with a team. You'll be on a development team, there'll be a design team. Designers will hand you designs done in either Photoshop or Sketch or some other graphic design program, whatever it is that they use. You'll get that file, but it won't do anything. It'll just be an image. It'll be a graphic. Sometimes it'll be a PDF, like what Udacity has given us. They've given us a PDF version of a mock-up, and you're expected to figure out, based on how the mock-up looks, you're expected to figure out how to write the code in both the structure, so your HTML, and in your CSS in order to achieve the desired look. That's the fundamental concept, and I think everybody understands that. And I think where people get confused is they don't know what code to write or what CSS to write in order to make this happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off and I'm going to break down this quote-unquote mock-up that we have, and it's a process that I call thinking in code. When I look at a mock-up like this, I don't see a logo and a head and a tagline and a hero image and three smaller images. What I see is the HTML code that I'm going to write that's going to create this structure. And then in my head, I'll take this structure and I'll shrink it down, because I know how the web works and I know how the web is responsive by nature. I will visualize in my head how I'm going to order the code so that it flows in a logical order from top to bottom, so that when I start mobile first on a small screen, I can expand it and it will just naturally flow on its own without having to do any extra CSS layout, anything. How that natural flow will just kick in and create this mock-up in the end on a desktop. So that's kind of the idea. So with that being said, I'm just going to use some tools here in Photoshop to kind of help me out. I'm going to grab this rectangular tool, and I don't want to fill. I want to get rid of that, and I just want a nice red stroke that's like a lot of pixels, so we can see it. Let's see how big that is. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to undo that. Alright, so when you get a mock-up from a designer, right, the first thing you're going to do is look at the mock-up and say, okay, I'm going to start thinking in code. So what I see in this mock-up is very simple. There are three rows in this mock-up, right? The first row is right here. This can be our first row. And when I say a row, what I mean is some kind of HTML container. for simplicity purposes, I'm going to say we'll use a div tag, right? Now in the real world, you're going to change it around, but I'm going to get to that. So for now, let's say that this red box that I've just drawn represents a div tag. That div tag, every div tag, is what's called a block level element. And block level elements on the web, by default, take up 100% width of their parent container. And I'm going to go over all this again when we get into the actual markup. I'm going to show you how to write the markup. So this is going to be a div. That div is then going to contain two child divs, or two child elements of some kind. The first one is going to be the logo here, and the second one is going to be a container that holds, actually I'm going to undo that because it's not big enough. It's going to be a container like this, and this container right here is going to hold two more, well actually the first container, the logo, is going to hold another child element, right? It's going to need an image tag for the actual logo, right? So we'll need an image tag. And then we're going to need some kind of text-based element for this name, and then another text-based element for this tagline or whatever, title, I don't know what we're going to call it. So based on this, based on all these red boxes that are killing my eyes right now, you can see that we have, at a minimum, I'm going to switch my tool out here, we have, I'm going to turn these off so that's not so bad. So we have our outermost container right here. That's what this is. Some kind of wrapper element, some kind of container element. We said it was going to be a div tag. This could also be the HTML5 header tag, which is actually what we'll use, because the rubric for this project wants us to use semantic tag names, and by that they mean the HTML5 tags of header and main and section and footer and article and those kind of things that are come along with HTML5. Back in the day, way back in the heyday, it used to be everything was a div. Like every single thing was a div, and that was it. And then they developed a term in the industry called divitis. You know, like you get, I don't know, bursitis or something like that. It's divitis. It's this inflammation of all of this containing divs. And I've worked in systems that have divitis like you would not believe. So anyway, so we have this outermost containing element, and that's the first element inside of our body tag that we're going to have. This will be the first containing element. Our header tag, or you know, if you're not worried about HTML5 semantic markup, then you would do a div with some kind of class, right? Probably header, something like that. And then inside of that, as child elements, we will then have two more elements. Now these inner elements will be divs, because there's no other tag that would be appropriate to hold that content. You could just put an image tag right here, but I don't recommend it. I would put a div that holds the image, and you'll see why when we get in the right in the code. So this will be like the outermost container will be the header tag with a class of header. Then this will be a div with a class of header logo. Then this will be a div with a class of header text, or header titles, or something to that effect. So we create this in markup. Then inside of our logo div, we said we could put the image tag itself. Okay, that one's pretty simple. Just the image tag for the logo. And then inside of our header text div here, we said we needed two text elements. Now the first one, this could be another, like an actual header tag, like an H1 or an H2. For SEO purposes, every page has a single H1 tag. And that usually is the page title. Now on the home page, we don't really have anything that would work well for a title, except for, you know, since this is a portfolio project, the title would be your name, or, you know, whoever the portfolio is for. That would make sense. So this would be an H1 tag, and then it could have a class of, you know, header title, something like that. And then this other piece of text here would have a tag, probably a paragraph tag more than likely, and then we can style it to look this way. Just like the H1, we could style it to look this way as well. So this is a basic fundamental concept. When you get a markup, when you get a mockup, you look at it and you start thinking in your head, okay, this is the markup that I need to write. I need some kind of container element to hold this. I'm going to have two more elements that are going to be side by side, and then inside of those side by side elements I'm going to have the actual markup elements themselves. The image tag for the logo, some text-based tags for the text on the right, and that's just how you do it. Now, because the web is responsive by nature, right, what will happen when this mockup shrinks, I'm going to see if I can do this. This is going to be wonky. Just bear with me. I'm going to hide these again. What's going to happen? Oops, I'm going to hide this one. This container element, this container div, I'm just going to resize it really quick, is going to do this. It's going to shrink. It's going to shrink in height. It's going to shrink in width down to, I don't know, phone size. So we'll say 480 pixels. How about that? Close enough, right? But because this text is here, right, this text is in a containing div, right, and that div is going to take up 100% width of its parent container being the header tag that we wrote as a container element, right? So this text is automatically going to flow by default. It's just going to flow underneath this other div that we put the logo inside. This one here? No, this one here? Oh, I gotta do this. And then the logo div right here, right? So what'll happen, actually I need to resize this again in order to fit, whoops, it doesn't like that. In order to fit everything, it's going to do this as well. It's going to grow in height, because what's going to happen is the other div that we created, this is the container div that holds that text content, it's going to shrink as well down to our 580 pixel width. Actually, I can't go 580, but you get the idea. And it's just going to go underneath the logo here. I'm just going to line these up. Something like that. It'll go there, right? And then there's the image, right? That's going to stay there. Then the two text-based tags that we wrote, the H1, that's also going to decrease in font size so that it fits within the container element, right? But it'll still be inside of its div, and then we can, make it however wide we need it to be. But the font size is going to have to adjust in order to fit this thing, like that. And same with our tagline div, it's going to adjust as well. I'm just going to shrink this down, and it's just going to adjust by its font size, like it's going to change. We won't have to adjust any widths, right? Because the web is fluid by nature. So what's going to happen to our header is it's going to end up looking like this. Logo at the top, right? And then text at the bottom. It's naturally going to flow underneath it. So what will happen is, when we start mobile first, we're going to start with our header looking something like this, right? Now, actually, the header won't be this tall or whatever, but get the idea. Oops, it doesn't like that again. Right? So it'll start like this, and then as it gets wider, the image is going to be responsive, the logo will be responsive, so it will just stay centered and fill the width on the left and right automatically. And then the text font sizes will get bigger but still be centered in some way, so it looks presentable. Right? It'll just get bigger, and then when it gets to a certain breakpoint, when it gets to, like, I don't know, 700 pixels wide, then we go back to our two-column layout. We can use Flexbox, right, in order to make the div that holds the logo and the div that holds both of the text elements go side by side. We would set flex on the outermost container, and it would take the two child elements that are inside of it and put them side by side, because the default flex direction for if you just define flex, it defaults to a row. So that's what it will do. And you'll see all this when we get into the code. But what I'm trying to get you guys to understand is that when you look at the mock-up, what you need to see in your head are these red squares that represent the markup. Right? One more time. When you look at the mock-up, in your mind, visualize the markup. right? The HTML, the code. Mockup, markup. I know they're very similar. Yes. So that's our header, right? It'll start like this, and then at some point we'll expand it to a wider version, right? We'll get out to here or something, and then what we'll do is take, if I grab the right div, I mean the right square, this one, and these two, and we just move them up to here on this side, and then we make them bigger, make them a little wider, like this, right? And when we do that, that probably made more sense when I did them all together, huh? When we do that, I'm sorry, this the container will get smaller automatically, like that, right? And then it just gets wider from there out to a certain point, and that's the behavior that we want to have, and we want that to be as natural as possible. And when I say natural, what I mean is the platform, the browser rendering engine, it knows to do things responsive by default. If you set a width on the container that holds your image and a width on the container that holds your text, if you fix those at a width because they're divs, then what will happen? They won't take up 100% of the parent, the 100% width of the parent container anymore. They're only going to take up, say, 20% and 80%, and they'll go side by side. It's what they'll do. So it's just the way it is. Or no, they won't go side by side. They'll still be on their own lines. But then you set the outermost container to flex, and your layout changes, and that's how it works. And you'll see when we get into the code. What I really want you to grasp is not the flow of how things work. You'll see that when we get into the code, but just know that when you look at a mock-up like this, this is how you need to think of it. I've got an outermost container. I'm going to have two containers because one thing is on the left, another thing is on the right. In the past, we would use floats. Float one element left, float the other element right. We don't need that stuff anymore. We've got grid, we've got flexbox, we have actual layout tools. Float was just a hack for laying out content. It's not really a layout method. Flexbox and grid, those are your layout methods. Stick with those, right? So it starts small, we get wider, boom, we get two columns, and then it just gets wider from there, no problem. And that's how the header is going to work, right? We got a header logo, header text, we have an image, we have an H1, and we have a paragraph. Boom. Lay those out and make it happen, right? Awesome. So I'm going to take all of these divs here, all these red boxes, I'm just going to group them in Photoshop. And this will be header. Right, and let me grab this one again, and I'll just make it back to full width. Grab these two and just bump them on over. And I'm just holding shift and using the arrow key. I'm not a Photoshop guru, but I've been using Photoshop for a very, very long time. Right. That one. Okay. Just all the keyboard shortcuts. Control T will resize. So there. That's what it will look like in markup, right? Now I know you're thinking like, what about this blue border thing at the bottom? What should we do? I would just add a border to the header, to this container, right? I would just put a border on it and some padding on the bottom in order to bump it down a little bit. And there you go, problem solved. No problem. Doesn't need to be, you can use a horizontal rule for this, but doesn't need to be a horizontal rule. I wouldn't use a horizontal rule because that's extra markup that you don't need. Boom, just do it through CSS, problem solved. Now, that's the header, right? Looks complex or whatever, looks kind of crazy. But it's not too bad. Oh, why doesn't it like to resize my thing there? Just trying to space this a little bit. Right? So, I know I'm covering the border or whatever, but you guys get the idea, right? The next thing is this big giant image. And in the industry, this is called a hero image. That's the name for it, right? So, I'm going to grab my rectangle again. Good border, okay. And just this is just going to be what it is, and that's it. You could just plop in the image itself and leave it at that. I wouldn't recommend that, just on personal experience and personal preference, I guess. I'm a little old school because I've been doing this for so long, and I have little techniques that I follow. So this is just going to be our hero image. So actually, let me group this. I know it's only one layer, but I'm going to group it anyway, just for organizational purposes. Hero image, right? That's our hero image. And it's just our giant graphic. But the problem is, this thing is, let's see if I can get some info on this rectangle. We can see that this rectangle is 3,027 pixels wide. That is ginormous. What you guys can't see, this is a 27-inch monitor that I'm working on. And I actually have 3 of them. Each of these monitors run at a resolution of 1920 pixels wide. And that's it. There's no more extra pixels or anything. This graphic is 3,000 pixels wide. So it could fill all 3 of my monitors at the same time. So what I'm getting at is, when you do a hero image like this, that's when you get into responsive images. Because let's just say I left this thing at 3,000 pixels wide for some unknown reason, and uploaded it to the interwebs, and people pulled this up on their phone. They're going to download this image that is 3,027 pixels wide on their mobile device. And you don't want that. They don't want that, because it's just going to be too big. I don't care how much you optimize it. I don't care what you do to optimize the thing. It's just going to be too large. A phone doesn't need an image that large. So that's when you get into responsive images. And I think there's a whole section on that about using a source set with sizes. I use it at work a lot. Now that all the browsers support it, I'm updating our system to use responsive images with all our components. So, you know, I have Photoshop, so if I wanted to save this out in Photoshop 2018, there's a simple way to do it. I can, this is probably a bad example. I would go to Export As right here. I don't know where that window is going to appear. If it's going to appear, here it is. It's on the other monitor. There we go. And it's going to use the dimensions that it's set to, because I didn't change them. But I can do this really cool thing right here. I can click this plus button and add as many other outputs that I want. I'm going to actually get rid of some of these because I don't need that many. Our system works with 3 images. So I would name this one with a suffix of like large, and then do this one at 50%, right? 0.5x or 0.5 times the width of the large image, right? And then I would call this like medium, right? And that might be for tablets. And then I might change this one to 25%, right? So it's really tiny, and do small. So this is just a thing in Photoshop, the latest version of Photoshop. Photoshop CS6 won't do this. You have to do it manually. But this is an amazing little tool in the latest Photoshop. I think they started it last year, actually. In 2017 they added this. And it's only been getting better over time. So if I like export this, it's going to ask me where I want to put it. And I'll just go Documents. I have my Grow with Google here. Here's FEND. And I'm not going to put it in my portfolio because that's a Git repo. I don't want to put it there. I'm just going to put it here in this folder. And what it's going to do, let me cancel, because you see the name here is rectangle 7. It's going to output 3 images. And let me get over here. There we go. That was in the other monitor. This is the actual folder it's going to get saved into. So let me save this. So I'm going to go save or export all, and then Documents, and then Grow with Google, and then FEND. And I'll just put it right here. Select folder. It's going to do its thing. And now you see I have a rectangle large, which is 80 kilobytes. But let me actually go to details. You see it's still 3,027 pixels wide. Even for a desktop, that's large. But it's only 80 kilobytes. Of course, it's just a white square with a red border, so I mean, it's not like it's doing anything amazing. It's not an actual graphic. Here's a medium, but you see it has different dimensions. It's got 50% of the dimensions of this large element, or large image, right? That's half the width. And then here's the small one, it's a quarter of it. So this is where responsive images come in, and you would just set it up with the source set, the small, the medium, and the large, and then set your sizes and, you know, make all of that happen. All right, now I'm going to get rid of this because I don't want to keep this. There we go. Right, so we'll work on that when we get to the point of doing this markup and adding this image. I'll show you how to use source set and responsive images and how to make it work the way you want it to. Okay, but this is just a hero image, and it'll have its container, and then it'll have the image inside of it, our nice responsive image. Okay, so right now we have our body tag, which is around like the whole thing, and then a header tag, and then this could be the main, right? Like this is our main content area, all of this right here, from the hero image to the featured work all the way at the bottom. We can do it that way. And then in our main we would have maybe a section for hero image with a section tag with a class of hero image and then the image inside of it, and then another section down here for featured work. So we go back to my rectangle and do another section here. So actually what we need is our main, right? We need our main wrapper right here. Something like this. Right, so this would be our main, and then inside of that a section for hero image, and then here we're going to have a section for featured work, like this. So you can kind of see, like, yeah, it's a mock-up, and it has, you know, all the stuff that it has, but I'm just breaking it down into the actual code that I'm going to write, right? This is going to be, so inside of this section, we've got a lot more going on. So we have a text element here, right? Probably another header tag, like a H2, since we have an H1 at the top. Up here, we have our H1 in our header. And then we can have an H2 right here. And then we're going to have, and this is actually where we would actually use divs, or I would anyway. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see. Where we'd actually use a div, I would use a div right here to hold this element. This whole thing right here. One div here, another div here, and another div here, just like this. And these three divs, if I can get it lined up, there we go. These three divs are an excellent candidate for Flexbox, because by default, these three divs are just going to stack on top of each other on a mobile phone, right? Very simple. Then as we get wider, we break them out into a 3-column layout using Flexbox. And they'll just automatically grow and shrink like we need them to. Right? So then inside each one of these divs is very simple. There's an image. I'm going to zoom back into a single one so we can kind of break it down. Inside of this div, there's an image that takes up 100% width, so it needs to be flexible and responsive. I'm not going to draw the border around the whole thing because it won't fit. Right? My border is too thick. So you'll have an image tag. You'll have another text element tag here, and another text element tag here. Right? And you'll just repeat this div 2 times. Image tag, right? Text element, and another text element. And then again, image, text element, text element. So we just repeat that. And you can see, like, everything is contained. Everything is self-contained within a single component, right? There's like a wrapper div that holds the content, or a wrapper container, whether it's a div or some kind of HTML5 semantic markup tag, like a section or a main, or, you know, whatever we're going to use. Footer, this could be, or footer would be weird if it was, but it could be. The important thing that Udacity has given us with this project is that we don't have to use what's in this mockup, right? Like if this was an actual Photoshop document, let me see if I have anything from work. Let me just pull this over here and check and see if I've actually got anything in here. No, I don't think I do. Like show you guys an actual mock-up. Like you would, for us, for this course, we don't need to extract any of these images. We've been given the okay and the go ahead. Use your own, use what you got. Just follow this basic structure and this layout and use whatever you want, right? That's some amazing creative freedom that they've given us there with that, because typically you have to follow some. Nope, I think I do have one. I do have one. Here we go. This is hopefully this is going to be okay. I'm not breaking any work-related stuff here. So this is an actual mock-up. This is the mobile, and this is the desktop. And I have to take it from here and turn it into here at the end. The colored blocks that you saw in the mock-up from Udacity, we do that exact same thing at work, so that I know what colors are available in the site, right? So that's what that was. So this is how it works. So there's a lot, like this is a logo right here. Oh, I don't want the crazy red box anymore. This is a logo right here. All right, I need to crop that out. This is the hero image. I need to crop that out of here, right? This little tagline thing here can be done with CSS, so no big deal. You would think that these arrows would be cropped out, but nope, you can do these arrows with CSS, so that's not a big deal. These graphics, each one of these individual graphics right here need to be cropped out, so I need to get these images, these assets. This crazy header that you see going on right here, this news header, that's actually done with CSS, believe it or not. That's not a graphic. This is a font icon, right? Because why use a graphic when I can use a font icon? This is just standard text that comes from a news component, no big deal. Right, another crazy header. Again, this will be done with text. This is an actual graphic because I don't have a font icon for this. I don't think they make one. It's some kind of specific thing. And then more text. And then this whole thing right here is a graphic. This big green thing, this map. I take that back. This is actually text on the page, right? But then we can turn those text layers off and just get the rest of this as a graphic, right? And then footer has just text, 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 text. This is our standard graphic for our company. And this is just a widget that you plug in from Google, so not a problem. So that's how you'd break it down, right? Really simple. Now this is just a div, or a header, like a header element right here that contains both the logo and the navigation, right? Then you've got a main element, and we have a div that this is actually a slideshow, right? This is a slideshow with a slide caption. So we have a component for that. So it's just a main element that holds all of this content down to here, right? So inside of main is these. This is a row, right? The slideshow. This is a row, right? This is another row. This is another row. This is another row, and this is another row. I don't know how many that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows inside of main. And each one of those rows is another container. This is a div with a class of slideshow, because it's going to be a slideshow. This is a div with a class of, I don't remember what I called it when I built it, but it's like hot links or something. Yes, this is hot links. That's another industry standard term, hot links. That's a thing. And there's JavaScript functionality in here. This is an anchor tag. I'm sorry, this is not an anchor tag. The search is just like a span. And when you click on it, there's JavaScript hooked up to it to make a search box appear. I forget exactly what it does on this site because I do so many of them. But yeah, you click this just like you guys saw, like with the hamburger menu. That's JavaScript. You click this button, and JavaScript makes the actual navigation menu that gets created in the CMS. It actually shows up, and you click on them. It's the same thing. This is just like the same concept. You click on this button, and it causes some div element to slide into view or fade in, or I don't remember what it does on here. I forget. This is just a link, goes to a form, contact page. This is a newsletter sign up. I think for them, goes to another page with some integrated newsletter thing from somewhere else. But we have our own form system that we use. If you click on our newsletter sign up, it pulls up a modal where you put in your name and your email and subscribes you. These didn't link anywhere. They're just graphics. They're just aesthetic things. And I would just need to crop these out. But this is another row. Then this is another component, news component, it's its own row. This is a success story, that's a component, it's its own row. And then this is just a graphic, just an image that sits in its own row, right? But then these rows, right, on a mobile phone, even though they stack, they're going to eventually look like this. So the logo and the nav, unfortunately on the mobile, the nav is above the logo. So in the source order, the navigation comes first. Then you've got a div with an ID of or a class of logo that holds the logo. But when you get to a desktop view, now the source order says, oh, the logo comes first, and the navigation comes after it. And that is extremely inconvenient because it forces me to turn this into a Flexbox container that changes the source order, right, visually. And then you see now I still have my slideshow with the slide caption, but now the hot link thing does something completely different. It's no longer a box, it's some kind of weird shape with a transparent background in order to let the slideshow come through it, and these buttons still all need to work. Not buttons, but links still all need to work. And then these three graphics went from this really weird stacked layout to a row. They're just side by side. And these next two rows, the news and the success, go from being stacked to being side by side. But the source order allows for that naturally, just as it gets wider. And then this big graphic just gets bigger, right? Like, it takes up the whole thing. And then you have the footer. Now here, the footer doesn't really change much. Yeah, it doesn't really change much, it just gets more space. So this is like a real-world mock-up, and this is a real site that I think I have to launch this week. Alright, I'm pretty sure it's going to go live this week, so maybe when it does, I'll give you guys a link and you can check out the code and whatnot. But that's what this is going to do as well. It's just in this case we're starting from the desktop version and getting smaller in the mockup. But you need to be able to think it through in your head. How am I going to write the code, and what elements do I need to include in my code just from looking at a graphic? Like, you just need to get good at that, and that just comes with time. That comes with time and practice. Time and practice. Like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time. It's not like I learned this overnight or in a 6-month course or anything like that. It has taken years, like years, to do this. There was no such thing as mobile when I started doing this. Everything was a fixed 960 pixels wide, and that's it. You just started with this. It was 960 pixels, and that's what you did. You created some weird wrapper container that had margin 0 auto and a fixed width of 960 pixels, and it centered it on a screen, and that was it. There was no such thing as responsive or mobile, and it didn't exist. So we've come a long way, and techniques have changed, and a lot has changed. So anyway, this is the markup that we're going to end up writing for this portfolio. Right? Now, with all that being said, this is about 40 minutes almost of me blabbering about thinking in code. That's what I'm trying to get you guys to see and understand with this, is that, when you get a mock-up and you're like, I don't know where to even begin, the mock-up will tell you where to begin. It's already designed in such a way that it's telling you exactly how to structure the markup, because the design, while it's done by a designer, as a developer, you just got to get in the mindset of thinking in code and looking at the mock-up and saying, okay, how can I do this? What's the most efficient way to do this without writing, extraneous markup? Try to avoid that if you can, right? So I think that's going to conclude this video, and in the next one we're going to start actually writing this markup, and I'll show you guys how to work in an editor and how the editor can help you to do a lot of this and save you a lot of time. Okay, so with that, I'm going to end this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Questions, comments, concerns, by all means, leave it in the video, or look for me on Slack, look for me in the forums. I have a Discord server running, sitting over here. I'll show you. Discord looks like this. It's pretty much just like Slack, except it has voice stuff going on. Oh, and I got somebody in here, JC. I don't know who JC is. Let me make him a member. Woo! There you go, JC. Live on video. You are now a member. Woo! Everybody give JC a hand. So, there we go. right? I'll put this back over here. I usually hang out in Discord in the evenings after work, after I get done coding all day long. And yeah, I'm there in Discord to talk, chat, discuss any of this stuff. I love talking about it. I love doing it. And I'm at the 40-minute mark. So I've kept you guys long enough. And I'll see you in the next video.